outreach going in the background. Gonna introduce our guest today. So I have today with me is Kevin, also known as the Inquisitorial Archive. I can't speak already. Go ahead and say hi, Kevin.
Hello, everyone.
All right, and then again today we also have our co-host Lucis, the Commissar.
Yes.
And then today we're also joined by Ryan, who it's Forever Screb. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
All right.
Don't ask.
All right. So, yeah, we're going to be touching on today is just a few different things. So, there is a question that I wanted to ask straight off the bat, and I'll just I'll end up just going like I normally do in the podcast, just from top to bottom. So we'll hit Kevin, Lucis, then Ryan, and go over everyone's opinion. The one I want to touch on, and I didn't have a chance to ask last podcast, is should a GM be able to do voices? Kevin, if you want to start us off, what's your opinion as a GM, as a player? Should you be able to do voices?
Let's put it bluntly, it's nice to have, but it's not a must-have. I mean, it's not like terribly high on list priorities, but it can be nice. It can be atmospheric at different points. It can make it clear if there's a few NPCs going around. I do like putting on the orc voice sometimes. I can have like nice moments where you've got the silly voices. Like there's one stage in Rogue Trader game where I think first like one of the PCs beat a bunch of orcs in combat and just obliterate, took out one shot, got like amazing roll, took out the orcs, and like two other orcs just kind of looked at each other and was like, not him. And yeah, it was like, but the players all laughed and stuff. We had fun. It's like, it's not necessary, but it's nice to put it in a nutshell.
All right, I can understand that. Lucis, how do you feel about it? Like, do you think is it like it's a must-have, or what do you think?
Should somebody have to do voices? No. Do I think they should try? Absolutely, because I think it provides like a pretty decent amount of entertainment for the players, and like it can be pretty fun to get into the character by doing the voice. And for me, like over like Discord or something like that, if I'm running a game, I have a harder time doing voices just because like it's a bit weird of an environment. I'm not used to like running games online. I'm used to doing them in person, and I'm like that guy who does a different voice for most characters, and like I'll like get out of my chair and like act out like actions like the ADHD DM like. But yeah, no, I think you should try as long as you're comfortable with that.
All right, and so a quick question, like following up with that: if they're not good with voices, does it make the experience worse? Like, obviously,
No.
if someone is like, if it's a little bit racy or vulgar, that can ruin it. But if it's just genuinely bad, if their British accents aren't really hitting it, or if it's just they're trying to do voices, but it's just their voice, does it make it worse?
I don't think it does. If anything, I think in certain circumstances, like especially like a comedic interaction between characters, it can actually make it better. Because like if you're doing a really shitty British accent and you're just absolutely like destroying that accent, but it's like some kind of like interaction where it's supposed to be humorous, that just makes it even better.
All right, yeah, I can understand that. Fair enough. And so Ryan, with you, same thing. Do you think it should a GM have to do that? Can it make the game worse? What do you think?
I think that GM should definitely try. Like, you're not going to get better if you don't at least give it a shot. Voices definitely add to the experience, I'd say, but it doesn't take it away if your GM can't do proper voices. Like, I'm not the best when it comes to voices, but at the same time, most of my players don't do voice at all, so I just have to do play by post. Yeah, definitely try, I'd say, but at the same time, it's not going to take away from the experience if your GM doesn't know how to do them properly. Hell, like Lucis, is that how you pronounce your name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it can sometimes add to the scene if they can't do a voice properly.
Yeah, I think I feel the same way as you guys with it. I think everybody should try, but it's definitely not a requirement. I mean, Lord knows that I've had plenty of games where I'm trying my best to do an accent or a voice, and I've literally like halfway through a sentence just been like, yeah, or something to that degree and shit, and then moved on. Like I'm like, you guys know what I'm trying to do. But yeah, I don't think I've, unless it was like somebody was just getting a little racy or being, weird with it. I've never actually had anyone be like so bad that it took away from it. Yeah, I've never had that issue.
I have used weird accent, well, not weird accents, just accents at points to help get stuff across in games like Running Only War.
Mhm.
I have a habit of like people from different worlds having different accents. So when the guardsmen show up, aside from even outside their gear, when they have a French accent, like a really bad French accent, it's like, oh, that's one of those fucking Bronte long knives. In my head, in every game I run, they always have a French accent for some, just because the first time I did it was that. But another time that was really useful was the first Dark Heresy first deck game I ever ran. We distinguished it. Everyone always knew it was really clear when people were speaking in High Gothic. Because when we're speaking High Gothic, we put on very happy British accents. Like, cheerio! And the thing is, no one ever misunderstood when somebody was speaking in High Gothic. Though it was really funny at one stage we were having full blown like diplomatic conversation, and like one of the players is just trying to not burst out laughing. They're like covering their mouth, keep their head down the table at the end, listening to us go back and
Just
forth.
turns into Mighty Python.
A little bit, yeah.
That's beautiful.
So we'll jump to the next question. So my next question is just touching a bit more. Last podcast we touched a bit on inspiration when it comes to GMs. Like, obviously as GMs or even players, character decisions, story arcs, even battles and stuff can be influenced by like, media, like books, games, TV shows, movies, stuff like that. Whether you're noticing it or you're actively doing it, there's going to be those references in there. I'm wondering if as GMs or even players, are there any particular 40K books or just even books in general that stood out for you guys where you're like, you know what, I want something from this in my game, or I want to do a character like this guy? So Kevin, is there anything that strikes you like that, hits you like that?
Um, Outside the RPG books, because I love going through them to find different things, I wouldn't say necessarily anything strongly comes to mind in and of itself. But what I actually like to mine for resource backing is like if I come across something that looks like a plot hole, I turn that into plot fodder. Like if you know about the Celestial Lines chapter, there's like a conspiracy with the Inquisition against them. Aaron Dembski Bowden wrote some novels about it as well, from Grimaldus's point of view, Back Templar Chaplain. But like they keep getting screwed over. So I made a Death Watch game where everybody's chapter either had a history with Celestial Lines or they were fighting on Armageddon during the Third War. And basically, it's like, yeah, a bunch of weird stuff happened. It is like, yeah, it's really weird that the Inquisition went really hard against them. But they were going on missions of fishing to Death Watch, but there was a secret mission, little side mission, a secret objective go off. And it was all basically to like, why the hell was the Inquisition going after the Celestial Lines so thoroughly? So if I find a plot hole, I tell you like, okay, how can I turn this rather than just like something that's going to bother me to like something that could be interesting? Because maybe it's not as it first appears.
Oh,
But
so you almost take the inspiration and get the answers out of it that you're seeking.
yeah, it's like, how the hell does this make sense? Why the Inquisition going after him? Like all this bad, crazy stuff going on. Why were the Inquisition so upset about like it was all dates back to the world where I think Celestial Lines had they'd pacified the local populace, but then like the Imperial Navy or whoever just Orby bombarded the crap out of the place. And the Celestian is like, what the hell, man? We had it pacified. You didn't need to just completely wreck the place. And like, oh, shut up. And they went off and they were going to make complaints to High Lords of Terra, but there was an accident with their ship full of loads of the high ranking guys. I think before they did the Gathering Storm and moving the storyline again forward, I don't know what's going on with them since, but I think they're down to 90 Marines. Like from chapter strength over the space of like 50 years or something, they'd gone down to 90 Marines, which is a case at that level, you're probably going to die. So it was actually really like players who were from like chapters who were allies of them or who'd fought beside them, in this Death Watch game. It was kind of just using what I thought was like, that's really weird. Though there are sometimes I think like, oh, that's really cool. Like before the chat we were talking about, I came across the Umbra, which are from the Xenology book, and they're this really weird, or to do with it's a god of the flood and things like that. I used that and had it like in a Death Watch adventure again. The players came across this Tau base and it made it into this creepy kind of like horror movie kind of thing, which has nothing to do with like, it's just a small little entry about them. It's like, oh, there's nothing about that there. But the Tau didn't know what the hell this thing was because they have very limited understanding of the warp. And it's almost like going through a horror movie thing, going through this base, all this stuff. I think I do a better job now than I did at the time. But just finding little weird bits and combining them together can be cool too.
Oh yeah.
I've spoken for long enough now.
No, you're fine. Yeah, but so Lucis, what same thing. So like, I mean, he's able to, basically start with, hey, there's a plot hole here, and I need my questions answered, and basically takes it in his own hands to drive his own story and bring his own plot, forward. Is there a particular book or something that has done that for you, Lucis, or even just drive particular character development?
For me, when I take influence from certain things, I try really hard to like, if I see like some kind of like plot point in a film or a show or from a book or something like that, I try really hard to like mix it up and change as much stuff as I can while keeping like, I guess, the core concept of what's going on. I'm usually not as good with like sci-fi settings in that aspect because a lot of the stuff I watch, like a lot of the media I consume, is not sci-fi, surprisingly. So I usually have an easier time finding influences from like fantasy settings and stuff like that. But like for example, this wasn't a 40K game, but I did a Warhammer fantasy game for my two brothers. It was just them, and I took a lot of like inspiration from like the Gotrek and Felix novels of like trying to, like two guys like roaming the Empire together, fucking just getting into shenanigans, and that went pretty well. But I try really hard not to make it obvious like where I'm taking something from, because then that kind of pulls the characters out. They're like, oh, I'm literally in this movie right now, basically.
You think it'll spoil it for him or something like that?
Yeah, so I really try to like dice it up and do a lot of different things where, like let's say like something basic, like some kind of like fetch quest kind of thing from a film. Like you keep the core concept of like you're trying to go get this thing, but you try to make it where they don't notice that you've obviously just kind of like ripped it out of something. But for the most part, I don't like to like take things directly from other sources. I try to like think of it on my own, and obviously like you have your own like subconscious like you like these things and this type of media, and you take it from there whether you realize it or not. But I'd like to think I'm original.
Just I don't plagiarize, I don't steal. I am me. So I mean, yeah, that's yeah, I mean, that's, I can agree with all that. And so Ryan, how do you feel with it? Is there a particular book that maybe caught you?
Comes to media like that, I really don't include all that much from what I've read or what I've watched. What I really take inspiration from is other games that other people are running that I might watch or I might be a part of.
Okay.
Uh, I can't think of any specific examples at the moment. Anything that happened was at least 2 years ago at this point, so
It's hard to like sit there and try to analyze like if you're not actively pulling influence from stuff, it's hard to go through and try to figure it out. But it's definitely, if you go through everything, it does happen, because you're just influenced by your environment. So it's like if you end up watching, you know, all three Godfather movies in like a week, sometimes that could bleed over into the campaign. Maybe you're stabbing somebody with an ice pick in an only war campaign or something like it. Doesn't necessarily have to be sci-fi stuff. Um, I've found myself in some moments just like not even like whole like plots or anything like that. Like sometimes I'll just pull like a joke and I'll have two NPCs do it to make the players laugh, and simple situations like that. I've pulled stuff from Band of Brothers before, or different shows where I can have two NPCs interact that will get a laugh out of the players. At the same time, when it comes to like plot and stuff, I've used basic inspiration for like just a frame. Like I've pulled from Macbeth. Like I've run a campaign where like it was essentially Macbeth. Like this dude and his wife were wanting to kill somebody who was in a better position than them, and then they ended up kind of losing the plot and getting murdered.
oh yeah.
So it's like, yeah, inspiration can come from just about anything, but there are definitely some moments where I've seen GMs that I've been a player for, where something popular is on recently, like the Mandalorian or the Astartes, shorts that one guy made, and it's like something ripped right out of that would be in there. It's like, oh, okay, guess that's fun.
Yeah, generally for me, I just try to come up with my own inspiration. Most of my content at this point has been original for the most part. Like there's been little hints of inspiration from other games or other sources, but nothing that really stands out to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it happens. Um, yeah. So I think my next question is just getting more into the mechanics of being a GM and dealing with stuff as players. Is that my question would be, as a player, do you prefer to see your GM's roles, or is that not a thing that necessarily you need? And yeah, I'll go to Kevin first. What's up, man?
Yeah, if all is going well, I don't need to see the GM's roles. To be honest with you, it's a bad sign if I feel like I need CGM's roles. Because if I feel like I need CGM's roles, then obviously I'm not trusting the GM,
Yeah.
and that's not a good place to be in. But if all's going well, I don't need to see him. Sometimes when I'm GMing, I do roll in front of people. Sometimes I don't. It depends on the game. But generally speaking, as a player, I'm not really pushed. I mean, if the GM wants to, you know, make things harder on you, they can just add more stuff. They can just they can make sure there's less handholds in that cliff. They can do a lot of different things. They can have another mob of orcs show up. It's like they can make stuff harder without having to do anything to do with the dice. So
So,
yeah.
as a GM yourself, how do you feel about it? Do you make sure that you
Um
show your roles, or no?
I would often will. There are points where I think it's appropriate, especially if the players don't know the result immediately. Like it's not like what if the bad guy's shooting at you, yeah, rolling from the people, whatever. That's different. But if it's a case like they're trying to get an NPC to do something, and the NPC believes they've given them accurate information, but you've rolled their forbidden lore or their lore or whatever. They don't necessarily know now. So the NPC gives them as much knowledge as they believe they have, but like they might be asking them about the wrong thing. It might not be possible for the NPC to know it, or they might have just the players don't necessarily need to know whether it was a good or bad roll. The information they're getting is what they're getting, kind of a type thing. Um, like it will be reliant upon a roll, but it's kind of a if they see me roll a 99, then they automatically at the back of their heads like, oh, whatever information this guy's given us, it's probably going to be pretty bad, or at the very least, very, very mediocre.
Yeah.
So those would be like there'd be situations where I would be more inclined to like keep it back, especially if it's the case like, oh, like sometimes I'll be honest with you, especially when rolling secret or rolling the open, there are times as a GM where I just pick up the dice and I roll them. Just to like put that little bit of like, a little bit of fire under the players. So like, Kevin could be rolling for somebody trying to pick my pocket or whatever. Usually not. Usually I'm just picking up the dice to kind of go like, guys, I'm just rolling the dice. They don't they don't know why I'm rolling dice. They're like, you've been talking for half an hour, guys, and that's fine. But the world continues.
Yeah, I'll do that in Roll20 a lot. I'll just roll a D100 or I'll just ask for awareness tests randomly, and then they start to sweat, and it's pretty funny. But so yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It makes sense with me. And Lucis, so how do you feel about it? Do you want to see your GM's roles? Do you show your roles, like whether or not people ask?
Usually as a player, if the GM is rolling out in the open or he's hiding it, I don't really care because usually I'm pretty trusting towards the GM. I try to assume they know what they're doing, so if they want to roll in front of me, roll behind a screen, do whatever they want to do, that's fine with me. I'm just here to have fun and be a player. But as a GM, I generally like if it's like combat or something like that, like I don't really care to like hide my roles. But if it's like some kind of social interaction where like I don't want them to know like if they passed or failed or anything like that, obviously I would hide it behind the screen. But like Kevin said, like I do sometimes, especially during like time sensitive things, when the party's trying to get something done, I like to just like roll just to roll. Like I'm not actually doing anything. It just makes them feel like pressured because I'm trying to give them that feeling of like, oh, we're running out of time. Like, because their characters know it's time sensitive, but the players need to kind of have that same anxiety of like, we need to get this done now. So I'll just be behind the screen, like rolling every couple minutes, and they're just like panicking at the table because they're like, "What's happening behind the screen? We're all gonna die! Oh God!"
Yeah, you can definitely cause some tension or some need of urgency just by click clacking the dice rocks. So like, but at the end of the day, like, so you're just like just whatever you got to do.
I got full faith in the GM.
he's the captain, so he's steering it.
He knows what he's doing. This isn't that meme like I'm not the captain now. Like this is all you, bud.
I can understand that. Yeah, I'm pretty chill when I'm a player, so I normally lean back and just like if the GM wants to fudge dice. That's fine. I normally don't pipe up unless it seems like he's actively like wailing on this one player in particular. Like if it's just like everybody passes except this one guy every single time, it's like I might pipe up. But yeah, Ryan, so what's your opinion on it? Like you as a GM, do you show your roles? How do you handle it?
Generally, I do show my roles, but I do think it should be up to the GM and his players whether or not he shows the roles. I mean, yeah, it's nice to confirm if the GM is, fudging his roles or not, but at the same time, it's nice to be able to trust your GM.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I trust that if my GM is going to fudge a roll or if I'm going to fudge a roll, which I can't do really, then it's going to be what's best for the narrative. Like if a player is going to die and it doesn't make sense for them to die there, I trust he'll do what he can to save them as long as it's within the bounds of what he can do. If a player needs to die and they somehow survive, well, I wouldn't fudge that kind of a roll, but yeah.
With players dying, we've touched on that a bit on other podcasts, and some GMs, they're just like you're playing the game. It's sink or swim. If you're gonna die, you're gonna die. It happens. And then others are like, we're here to have fun, and dying isn't fun. But I know Lucis is just like, if they die, they die. This is how it is.
It be what it be, man.
If a character's gonna die, I mean, that's unfortunate. But if it's gonna be a TPK, that's when I'm gonna go like, okay. Because a TPK is not a story.
It totally depends on what caused the TPK, in my opinion. Like, if I just totally just misjudged the combat and I threw a Carnifex at my boys and, thinking they're hot shit and they turn out to be a cold dookie, like, that sucks. Alright, Carnifex too much. You're all dead. I might reset this and rethink them some things, but if they get multiple warning signs and they get murdered, on a fair fight, that's their fault, to be honest.
It might not be a fair fight. It might be a case of your 5 guardsmen are fighting 2 grots, and it was meant to be a joke encounter, and just the dice have gone weird. They can't dodge. The grots are killing everyone, and you're like, this is lottery winning odds. Like, that's not a like if some of the PCs die, that's one thing. But it's the end of the game. Although that would almost be worse as the end for the story you'd get out of it.
Hey man,
it's too bad.
They got fate. They got fate points. They got teammates. If they get killed by 2 grots, that's just their fault. They've got too much help.
In a 5e game I was running, one of the party had it was heading towards a TPK. So I had the bad guy start knocking them out, and some players were like, Kevin's pulling punches, whatever. It was really funny. It was like, oh, they're taking your life for a reason. Like, Kevin's making this up. He's like, he just doesn't want everyone to die. That's fair enough. I'm not going to complain. But that session, while we were still around the table, they looted the bad guys like letters and stuff. And I pulled out a prop I'd prepared before, and I was like, oh, that bad guy we killed a brother of in the previous adventure. Oh, he's literally been talking around to the other bad guys. It's like, if these guys show up, take them alive. I'll give you good money. It's like, oh, there's a legitimate reason for us not to just be killed.
I often have the opposite problem, really. Like, instead of like my NPCs rolling really well and just like slaughtering all my players, like my players will get themselves into a situation where they kind of like all deserve to die and then somehow manage to just slaughter their way out of the situation.
Yeah, that can happen. It does happen. There's it's really hard to get to that balance where it's like, okay, I wounded everyone in the party to like a third of their health. They killed everything, and hey, it's a well fought fight. That's a very thin line, because it's like a little bit over means 3 people got downed and 2 are dead, and a little bit under is like nobody's hurt, and so it's very hard to.
Well, I don't know if you know anything about like Shadowrun or anything like that, but I was running a Shadowrun game, and they had pulled a hit on somebody who worked for one of the big corporations, and they had forgotten to get rid of their burner phones, and they got tracked back to their living space by like a hit squad of like corporate agents, and like I was like, they're all about to fucking die. Like, there's like, they fucked up bad. Like, they should have easily known to like get rid of those things. Like, so I sent like 2 full squads, and the entire party just rolled like crazy, and I was rolling like shit, and they just slaughtered them. I was like, this should not be happening right now. That's what I often run into, is like when I need to roll well for the proper, like, I guess, punishment for like bad role playing or whatever happens, I end up rolling like dog shit.
Oh God, I feel that.
And they get away scot free, so they learn nothing and they just continue to make mistakes.
So touching on like players in combat and stuff, I have a question of, so as GMs, how do you feel about, or like, how do you handle players using meta knowledge? Like, there's just blatant, I don't want to call it cheating, but like, if you're, oh, I'm like a backwater world, like agri world, and I'm a little girl, she wouldn't know what a Carnifex is. So that character, the player being like, "Oh no, that's a Carnifex. I can hear it. I'm running." And it's like, well, you wouldn't know what a Carnifex is. But then there's the simple like meta stuff where in mid combat you have players discussing strategy when the characters would not be able to. So as a GM, how do you handle stuff like that? Not just the blatant ones, but like even the subtle stuff. Like Kevin, how do you handle that kind of stuff? Do you handle it at all?
I think generally speaking, the problem is with metagame knowledge. When you really get into it, there's no clear line where things are because it is constantly a thing. Because you even have those moments as a GM where you're inspiring metagame knowledge where somebody goes, "Oh, I'm going to do this." It's like, are you sure you want to do that? Because even they don't know why you're trying to remind them of something because maybe they've forgotten something. They're still going, the GM's kind of giving me a hint here that this might not be a great idea because you're going like, you're going to get yourself fucking killed because you've got there's a minefield over there, and you're about to walk through it. But so it's the line gets a bit blurry, but I just think that my players were generally pretty good with it. But the in-game players coordinating, as long as it doesn't go on too long in rounds, I don't mind a little bit, especially because if they can call out to each other and things, as long as they don't get too involved. I'd probably let them say more than they can say in a few seconds, that you would be able to say in this period of the round, because for the case of like in some ways like Death Watch or Only War, the party's been through boot camp, they've been through training, they know like levels of like shorthand and different things that the players don't, because they haven't all gone off. Like maybe some of them have gone off to military training, but the party hasn't, like, of the players, the characters have. So I'm kind of more forgiving about that to an extent. But that said, even if they're calling stuff out in characters case, like if the bad guys can understand your language, especially if they have similar training, like you're playing against Severin Dominic guys in Only War, they're gonna recognize what you're saying. A bunch of termagants or harmagants, they're not gonna know what you're saying. They're
Yeah.
not gonna care. But like, so the players need to keep that in mind too. But if you're like, oh, we're not talking at all in character, it's all out of character, then be case like, okay, it's gonna be very limited what you're gonna be able to say to each other, guys. But if you're saying it in character, they still gotta keep that in mind. It's making noise, and the bad guys might, even if it's not like other humans, if you're fighting against blood axes, they're going to be a lot more aware of like how the guard work and things than the average orc. They're going to so you might be tipping your hand if you're going into too much detail.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Lucis, you're the Iron Hand Commissar. How do you beat your players into submission when they're metagaming?
Well, this may surprise you, but Iron Hand Commissar over here. When it comes to like smaller metagame, like stuff like about like what your character would and wouldn't know, and like social interactions and stuff like that, I usually I'm like, hey, your character wouldn't know that. Whatever. Don't use that info that you have out of game to use that. But like in combat, um, generally, I have, I guess, a soft spot for most players for combat, because having military experience and like knowing small unit tactics pretty well, and having been into like strategy and like military history since I was a little kid, I usually end up shit stomping my party if I go like all out on them with my NPCs that I'm fighting them with. So I kind of give them like, they can all use their brain collectively to like come up with a cohesive strategy to win, rather than me just like being like, no, nobody can talk, nobody can say anything to each other, you wouldn't know that, like, now shut up while I beat the shit out of all of you, like. So I try to like pull it back, because I'm like, clearly these people aren't into this stuff like I am. They wouldn't know that that's a mistake or this is a mistake. So like I let somebody else catch it for them, be like, hey, you might not want to do that. here's why, and explain them. And then usually my characters are pretty good about it and be like, well, I don't think my character would understand that, so I'm going to do this anyway. Like, I find that usually if you try players to not metagame, they don't metagame, but every now and then you do get that player who's like, oh, thanks for that info. I don't know whether or not my, two intelligence character would understand that or not. Like, that's what's best, so that's what I'm going to do. But I don't usually run into that.
All right, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, yeah, you can tame it where it needs to be tamed, but yeah, I seem to see that most GMs let it slide mostly during combat, especially if there's new players. You'll have veteran players kind of holding their hand and being like, "Nah, you should probably do this now, or maybe do this," or even in like D&D or 40k games when they're trying to like combo off of each other. It's like, hey, I could do
Yeah.
this to stun them, and then you.
Well, I also try and tell, like, if I have veteran players and newer players, I try to tell those veteran, like the newer player, I'm like, now he's telling you this because he's trying to help you out. However, this is your character. You don't have to listen to him. Like, I try to make it perfectly clear to them, like, this is your character. Do whatever the hell you want. Just because they've played more than you doesn't mean they know your character.
Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
If your character wants to do something dumb, have your character do something dumb.
It's the RP that always matters, man. If your
Yes.
character's stupid, be stupid. It's all right.
Yes.
And Ryan, so same thing. How do you metagame knowledge handled when you're a GM? Like, how do you handle it with players? How do you handle it in combat? How do you handle it at all?
I generally have a rather similar approach to handling it, especially during combat. I'll let it slide. Like, I make general assumptions, like, oh, the PCs are only going to be really dealing with people who know about the situation at hand. If they have to deal with someone who doesn't know, yeah, I'm going to make that very clear. But thankfully, that sort of RP situation does not pop up very often. It's mostly during combat that metagaming really becomes an issue. Well, I wouldn't even say issue, just that's where, for the most part, many GMs are going to see it. Like, players are always going to be telling each other, oh, you should do this next, or you should do that next. And I'm always going to assume that the group at least knows basic squad tactics and basic communication. Like, not shouting what you're going to do next over the din of combat and instead doing it over your Vox.
They got to have a minimum of 5,000 hours on a range. They got to be able to pie corner. I need breaching strategies. If my players can't tell me the correct way to take a valley with 13 people, then I don't see the point in playing.
What's the RE factor of C4?
24.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone. Now, I have seen some GM posts before where they're like, no noobs, or like just scrubs get lost, or something like that, where they don't really want to mess with veteran players. But it's not like with like online video games or something. It's not like you're sitting there being like, all right, it's rank 5 people and up only. Nobody's sitting there being like, asking and doing a quiz about like, your knowledge before you jump in a game. Everybody's, for the most part, seems pretty patient. But yeah, there's just, I mean, you just kind of, as a GM, I feel like you kind of have to just adapt with most of your stuff. You have your preferences as a GM, just like every player has. I don't like to hear this. I don't like to do that. There's your own house rules. And then if you get people who they don't have a strategic mind, and they want to be one. It's like, I want to be a squad leader, but they really don't have the management for it. It's like, that's why I always tell them, I'm like, the skills are there for a reason. Roll a command test, I'm the GM. I'll give you some hints. I'll give them like 3 strategies if they pass their command test, and be like, here, these are your options that your character thinks of based on his training. And I try to help them, because at the end of the day, I feel like the RPG is meant for the players to be who or whatever they want. If they want to be a smart guy and they're not smart, then it's there. If they want to be a big guy and they're not big, it's there. Um, Kevin, how do you feel about that? That's another GM question. Is that, like, if someone's not particularly like that character, like in the cases of they're not strong and they want to be strong, that's pretty straightforward. Now they're punching and stuff. But if someone's not smart, they can't think of ways out of problems, but they want to be that guy. Are you willing to go that
Yeah,
extra mile to help them, like by using their skills and stuff?
I am. I am, yeah. And certainly if you invest in skills, like especially the 40k games, because there's so many the forbidden lores, the tech uses,
Yeah.
slash lores, and common lores to a lesser degree, but like there's so many of these things where it's either you have it or you don't. So them even having it is a huge deal. So like they immediately can get stuff like that. Some systems aren't as good on that front. So but if you invest in the skills and they're getting advice from the GM and the other players, like what skills have done to be better at, particular knowledge things. Yeah, strength obviously said is easy one. One that's a little more difficult sometimes is I find it's like the social skills. And some people, and I myself included, sometimes I want to play the social character, but I'm not always in the zone with the social thing. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you want to be the suave, charismatic guy, and maybe it's just a person wants you that, but they're kind of quiet, they're shy, they don't really want to roleplay the whole thing out, or they're just having an off night. Sometimes I think it's reasonable to go like, okay, you know what, this is what I want to do. In general broad strokes, I'm going to try and, rather than ask this guy directly about this, I'm going to try and tease out the information from him indirectly. Can I just roll a deceive or an inquiry check just to see if I can get the information? And if they're just not comfortable or not in the mood for doing role playing, that's fine. That said, good role playing deserves to get a bonus often enough. Make it a bit easier, or make the disposition of the opponent, the other party, better. But like the social side is another thing, as well as the intelligence one you pointed out. The social characters with a not necessarily so social player, and you've the opposite problem where you've got the really really social charismatic player, but it's like that's great RP, but your flesh terror has 15 fellowship and you have no social skills. So yeah, it's not that you can't do this, but the dice aren't going to back you up on this. Even if I give you a bonus, you're really bad at this.
Yeah, I can see that. So like, and Lucis, so like, how do you feel about that? Like, if your players are lacking and they want to use the skills. So like, I've run into GMs before where if someone themselves isn't charismatic, whether they have high charisma or not, he wouldn't let them default to just rolling it. And I'm like, you let us roll for strength tests. We don't talk our way through a strength test. And he goes, but charisma, you have to RP it and stuff. And I'm like, so you'll fail people if they roll good, but they can't create the words. I'm like, I feel like someone's rolls, if they don't know what to say, if they're not like a ladies' man and they're trying to seduce someone or something, I feel like if they roll and they pass, the GM should take it from there. And it's like, oh, your character leans forward and says this, and she swoons, or whatever. How do you feel about that, Lucis? Is there times where you help players out like that, or are you strict with it where it's like if you can't RP it, you ain't doing it?
Usually when somebody's like incapable of like doing it through RP somehow, I'll just go off of like the rolls usually, and I usually have the easiest time with like more like intellectual skills, like knowledge based stuff, because it's easier for me to be like, okay, you rolled, you passed, you know this, and then it's that easy for them to just be like, okay, I know this, and this is how I interact from this point forward, knowing that information. The social one is a little bit harder because there's a lot more RP involved because you're directly interacting with the NPCs or other characters. But I still just kind of like if it comes down to a roll, if you pass, you passed. I might throw in a little extra like dialogue or something else in the environment happens and it helps them in some way, just to get it across better. Usually the physical ones are the easiest, but I've actually had a player before who was like, nothing against them, but they were so unathletic of a person throughout their life that they didn't understand what it is to be athletic. Like they were always like being like, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that." And I'm like, "No, you can do that." Like it's definitely possible. Like your character's a very strong and fast and agile person.
Like,
Like,
you attempt to
that's
run across the
definitely
street in a minute. It's like, nah, that's not physically possible. It's
well,
like-
they were like they were leaping from one rooftop to another, and I told them it was like a 10-foot gap or something. They're like, "Oh, that's not even possible. I can't go that route." And I'm like, "That's easily possible for an athletic person." It's like there are long jumpers who fucking jump like 30 feet, right, in a single bound. Like it's definitely possible.
he's over there calculating and checking for wind speed, and he's like, it's not feasible.
I can't do that. And I'm like, dude, you've got like 45 agility and like 50 strength. Jump. Like, that's your character, man. You made a strong, athletic, like melee oriented character. Like that's what you do.
So
Like,
if they're not in that mindset, you'll let the roles decide the fate, and then you'll just kind of back them up.
yes.
All right. And so Ryan, same for you. How do you handle that if not too smart, wants to be a strategist, not too strong, wants to be, not too charismatic, wants to be a ladies' man. How do you handle it? Do you do the same thing, like kind of back them up with the roles, or are you more like, would you convince players to maybe rethink characters? Like, hey, maybe you better off doing this.
Generally, I try to support whatever character the player wants to make. Like, it doesn't matter to me if they're not exactly the most strategically intelligent or if they're, well, like talking to a misanthrope, but I would always try to nudge them in the right direction. If they didn't know what to say to, say, the imperial governor's daughter, but they had a high charisma, I'd still let them roll and I'd kind of give them a basic outline of what happens if they succeed.
All right.
And kind of going back to the intelligence thing, if they had the knowledge skill, then I would give them the information if they passed the roll. If they had Tactica Imperialis, then I would give them some Imperial tactics if they succeed the roll. Generally, I try to nudge them in the right direction. But if it just gets to the point where, like, they insist on, oh, I succeeded this role, but I'm going to do it my way, and their way is just awful, then I might suggest they try playing a different character.
Well, so a follow up with that, Ryan. If you're working with them, and you have the same thing, charismatic, intelligent person, whatever it is, and they, similar thing, you're backing it up with the roles, you're helping them out. If you if you have group, other players, and they're just kind of like giving them crap, whether it's funny or not, would you kind of like let that keep sliding, or would you shut that down pretty immediately? Like if they're just not that smart, and for some of the other players the answer is obvious, but they roll and you kind of help them through it. If it's an obvious girl or boy who's a little shut in or maybe a little shy, and they want to get the fake kiss from the fake person because it makes them feel real feelings or something, and they're making fun of them for that, do you just kind of shut that down, or you talk to the people? How do you handle that?
That kind of depends on the situation going on at hand. Generally, I try to encourage some form of, cognitive dissonance between characters and the players, just so they realize, yeah, that fake kiss isn't going to be a real kiss. You shouldn't be feeling anything from that. However,
Yeah, you want that to be the case, but sometimes it's not.
yeah, oh
Some
god.
people get way too into it. I mean, some people get personal even when
Oh,
characters get mad.
don't even get me started. Anyways.
Are you trying to say you don't ERP with your fucking players, Ryan? What the fuck? You're not
Look,
having
I've been
erotic roleplay?
Oh
Come
Lord,
on.
yeah, that's
Look, whoa,
that's
hold on now. Are you saying I'm a coward? I'll
that's
have you know that demonic prince
that's
did all 15 of those space marines.
that's been something that I've had to like put nip like real quick. Like some it now it totally depends on what game it is or what system, because some RPG systems, some games, unfortunately, draw the attention of certain people who are in a certain mindset. And I've had some 40k games where some people wanted to be like a little rapey or something, and I'm like, yeah, hey, don't, like, that's not what, I'm not here for that. And it's
Yeah.
like, I never thought I'd have to, but I do prelude every campaign now with, hey, we don't rape things. We don't attempt to rape things ever. I don't care what it is. And it sucks that it sucks. It's the internet. You have to kind of have your rules set and tell people out the gate, because God forbid they start trying to do weird stuff with other player characters, and then they're like, oh, you never told me that I couldn't do that. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I should have told you can't say racial slurs. I should have told you to be just commonly decent in and out of character. I'm sorry.
How dare
generally
you kink shame?
generally, to be honest, I encourage my players to go all out as long as it's in character. If it steps outside of the boundaries, then that's an immediate shutdown, and I've kicked players out of my group over that before.
But as a GM, I feel like you need to establish the line from the get-go. Like, I'm an individual where I'm not. I get a little
Oh, no.
offset. I don't like the whole sexual stuff, which is why you won't see me run like
Oh,
a
yeah,
Dark
yeah.
Eldar game. But there's some people
Yeah.
that's what they want, and it's like, all right, if we know from the get-go, then we're good.
Oh no, I have my limits too. Don't get me wrong. Like, I know I didn't really make that obvious, but I'm talking about things like certain types of languages. I guess I can do fade to black, but I'm not going to be enthusiastic about it. I'm going to make it known.
Yeah,
Generally, if it gets to the point where other players get uncomfortable, that's when I draw the line. Because this is supposed to be an everyone thing. I don't want one player having all the fun, gang banging all the Dark Eldar, while everyone else is watching from the sidelines, readying their bolt pistols.
yeah, yeah, that just falls under, like, you just gotta know what the players and what the GM are where they're wanting to cut the line off, what they're wanting to get out of the game. Because it's like, there's just some stuff. Maybe there's a time and a place. There's definitely Discord servers where they're running Dark Eldar games where that's the focus. There's it's like, you just let them know from the get go. No one ever has to be surprised. You know. But so I think the last question of tonight we're gonna focus on. Well, actually, it's kind of two questions combined, but it's comparing and talking about the Ultramarines movie from like 2000 something. What was it?
Question.
Ah,
Question.
what's up?
What is that?
So, Games Workshop went and developed and had an animated movie of the Ultramarines on a planet fighting a demon prince, saving an iron. It was an Imperial fist and a chaplain, and saving the universe from this demon prince because he was gonna go and basically blow up McCraig. So, comparing that to the the
No, I don't
newest
want to.
the newest thing, like Astartes.
I genuinely thought he just like no, I don't want this gone.
But comparing that to like the new stuff of Astartes, and it's like that Ultramarines movie probably had like, well, I know it had because it had pretty decent actors in it. It had a crew, it had a director, all that, and then you have this one. It's an Astartes fan made thing, made by one guy. Kevin, what's your thought on that? Like, when that Ultramarines movie came out, I was starved for any kind of like 40K like movie or anything. There was nothing.
Yeah, it was. I did watch it. A friend of mine picked up the DVD. I did watch it, and then I looked. It was like, what the hell was that? And he's like, I know. And that was the most enjoyment he was getting out of showing to people. They were going like, that it's 40K. I'm not gonna say it's not 40K. There's weird stuff in 40K, but they just missed the mark so many times in just small little weird ways. You got the Crozius Arcanum, the scepter kind of type thing,
Yeah.
the symbol of office, and it's shooting fire from where you're like, is this about to be a relic special one? What the hell's going on? It's very odd, and the whole thing is just really weird. Whereas the Astrates thing, Astrates is really impressive that one guy did it. Obviously, this is like 10, 15 years later. So although they had a studio, I think he just had better technology to a degree.
Yeah.
But I think it's like fueled with passion. It's one man, and he didn't have like necessarily. Although he's got paid transporters, I'm not sure how hard he was on deadlines himself. It's not like the guys who CGI need to have this out because they've got another thing coming in, But he did a really good job. It's a simple enough story, but it's got like sets of some cool cinematics and things like that. And I'd love to see more stuff from him, especially in 40K. But
I don't think anyone even talks in Astartes, do they?
There's one or two. I think
like the orbs whisper to each other, and that's like the most dialogue.
That's it.
Yeah.
Which obviously
there are sounds that come
Yeah.
from people.
Yeah. Suddenly, if you had all the Space Marines talking to each other, or like the guys defending talking to each other, suddenly you'd have to have voice actors. So that's one of the parts where, I'll say Strategies has, better dialogue because it has dialogue. Not Strategies Ultramarines has better dialogue, but it doesn't have a better story because just through the like showing it, did a really good job. He had a tighter concept of what he wanted to do, and he wasn't just like, well, it's got to be putting big stakes on the line. It's important to the characters who are there. Some of it you're still looking at going like, because it's not explained, you're going, what's going on? What's these weird guys? But it's interesting. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
Strategies is it's goddamn interesting and it's cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it does really just show, how far we've come with technology. That a single individual could do this, from the storyboard to, the animation. And I mean, yeah, I've seen a lot of reactions to the video where they're just people in the film industry, or they're just people who don't even know 40K, but they've heard of Astartes, and it's like, I'm like, in GW, like I think they're doing a deal with them. I think is what I last heard. I'm like, how did they not just give this guy a team and just write him a check for whatever the hell he wants? It's like, I love the Ultramarines movie just for the simple fact that like I was younger and I was into 40K, and that's all I had. I mean, that's kind of all we had until Astartes. Like, there wasn't anything to compare it to, and you compare it to Astartes now, yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, Lucis, what you thinking about it?
I'm gonna be completely honest. I think the difference between Ultramarine and Astartes, like taking away, like the obvious difference in technology at the times of their production, like it just goes to show you like how much GW can kind of like fuck up their own product. like Kevin was saying, like there's just things in the Ultramarine movie that just don't make a lot of sense for 40K, like these like small little details. Like, you're the one who created this entire universe, and you're gonna let some fan by himself produce something significantly better than like even taking away like just how much better like the like CGI is and everything like that. Like it's very clearly like storyboarded better. Like even though there's not dialogue, like the progression makes so much more sense. And like even with the Space Marines not talking to one another, like why would they? They're boarding a ship. They're here to kill people. They're here to get a mission done. You wouldn't see them, taking their helmets off and chattering back and forth with one another for 10 minutes during a battle. Like that's not what they do. They're professionals.
And that's the thing. They could be talking to each other the whole time. The Astartes
Yeah.
could be
And
literally
you just can't hear them.
walking around corners like, "Oh shit! Did you see how I stabbed the hell out of that guy? That was crazy! Yo, yeet!"
Yeah.
Like you don't know. They
Yeah,
got their
like-
helmets on.
But when it comes to like stuff like that, any kind of like media that GW produces itself, it's almost always lackluster. And like I hate to like shit on GW because I know a lot of fans of GW shit on GW all the time, which
Yeah.
I don't understand personally. But like when it comes to those things, like Ultramarine shows you that like a true fan of the setting is always going to do a better job than them.
And just to be clear to raise it, because I want to double check it, I knew it was one of the well-known ones. The writer for Ultramarine is Dan Abnett.
So yeah, because
It's not nobody.
I had no issue with the story. I hadn't like that's why I really like the Ultramarines movie at its core. But like when you look at the difference between the Ultramarines movie and Astartes, like yeah, you have the visuals and everything. I don't even know why I'm mentioning that again because that's obvious. But you also have like that guy has to have some kind of like background in film or something. Maybe he's in film school or something. Because if he doesn't, bravo, he's amazing without needing any education in it. His story, you could mute it. I mean, you could silhouette it and just have it be black and white. The story is told in action. And in the Ultramarines movies, there's entire chunks of that movie where if you don't have audio, you don't know what the hell they're doing. You don't even know what's going on. Like they're just sitting there. You can't read lips because they're wearing helmets. and I feel like just like with like chefs having to be like you eat with your eyes, you got to smell the good food, you got to taste it. I feel like with the movies, like there's a lot of levels to it. Like you got to be able to tell that story in a lot of different ways with the actions they're doing, with the dialogue, with editing, everything. Like you have to bring that all together to deliver something good. And the Ultramarines movie, it's good for fans. I feel like it was a good movie for fans, but you're never gonna get more people onto 40K with that movie because the Ultramarines movie is like an okay movie at its core. It's not great.
They could have taken. So just because they could have taken the broad strokes, what they did for the Ultramarines movie, changed some of the names, still have like the demon and stuff, and they could have done it live action, and it would have looked better because CGI wasn't great. Like they're trying, but like it's obviously easier with Space Marines and like guards where you can see their faces because they want them talking the whole time. It's more difficult. But if you had live action, basically guardsmen or whatever, you could have told the broad strokes of the same story, but it probably would have been a lot more accessible. And maybe actors on the set would have gone like this, maybe I might ad lib here, or we might, play with it and might do something. It might come across more natural and stuff.
Well,
if I'm going to be completely honest, if you aren't a 40K fan, Ultramarines isn't an average movie. It's not a good movie.
yeah, no, it's just okay.
You have to be a big fan for it to even be like mediocre.
Mm.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I might just be an ass.
No, Ultramarines. I said it. Like Ultramarines is not gonna get new players. Like it just isn't. You're never gonna show someone that because it didn't hold up.
It was very clearly like them just trying to like find some way somehow to get more players so they can make more money. It wasn't like there was no heart and soul put into that film whatsoever, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I don't.
and I mean, but GW is trying. Like GW, they released a trailer a while back, and I need to go get that and probably throw the link in. But they're going to be doing similar to like Halo Legends, similar to like what is it called, like Love Butts and Robots or something on Netflix.
Love, sex.
Oh, okay, all right, I was close. So similar to that, they released a trailer that showed like 10 or 12 different art styles, and they're gonna be releasing these like episodes. I don't know when, because I think it's been more than a year since that trailer came out on their channel. But I find that's gonna be interesting. I mean, with GW having as much money as they do, they probably don't have as much money as Netflix. I'm gonna say that. I don't think they do. But having as much money as they do, they should be able to do stuff similar to Netflix and just get some artists or get some like companies to just pump out like a 30 or 40 minute, animation, and then just have it as their own thing. Make their own Halo Legends. I don't know why they haven't done that like 10 times already. You know, I I may be in the minority, but I feel like 40K does not need to be live action. I feel like just like the Halo live actions didn't do it for me. I felt they were kind of crap. Um, I feel like if 40K's live action, it's just not going to work right. It's going to be clunky. It's not going to look good. I feel like it has to be animated every time, and I feel like they could get some really good stuff pumped out. But I don't know. I guess we'll wait and see how it goes. Maybe this Astartes guy starts pumping out his own special with GW, and we're gonna be drowning in movies and shows soon enough.
Well,
Hopefully.
he's already released the next trailer for his series that he's trying to do now.
Oh, what was his trailer for this one?
It was on his Patreon. My brother is one of them, and he showed me the trailer, and it shows a whole bunch of different chapters and like battles and stuff. And there's a scene where like orcs like swarm one of the space marines and are like clubbing him to death and shit. Like it's very clearly well produced, just like Astartes, except on a bigger scale. Because now he has other people working with him.
Good lord. So it's begun. Hopefully, hopefully it does good, and we'll see some DVDs and stuff. Maybe we'll see some more games. Maybe someone will pick. Well, actually, there is another game coming out. Isn't there one where it's like a hive city and they're fighting like Nurgle and
Darktide,
stuff?
I think it is.
Yeah, I hope it's some kind of like Left 4 Dead kind of co-op game, because
It is. It's made by Fat Shark, the people who made Warhammer Vermintide and Vermintide 2.
Oh, okay. Then yeah, we're in good hands. I mean, and
Very much looking forward to that.
I did hear rumors the guys who made the Space Hulk Deathwing were going to be making a Inquisitor game. So that's
I actually kind of like Deathwing.
that should be good. Yeah, I mean the Space Hulk, they did everything phenomenal in that one. The bolters sounded amazing. I felt like a Terminator. It felt bulky and big and shit. They did a good job. But all right, so we made it to 9:08. I think I'm gonna call it here. So again, it's me, Gordo. I was your host. Also, my co-host Lucis, the Iron Hand Commissar, who beats his players into submission.
Sometimes you just gotta have a firm hand.
Just gotta let them know. And then we had our guest Kevin, the Inquisitorial Archive. Say bye, Kevin.
Good night, everyone.
Say bye. And then Ryan Forever Scream. I just want to thank you
You
guys.
don't even need to.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for showing up. This was a great time. But yep, you guys tune in next week. We'll have another episode. I think our next guests are who are our next guests? Oh, it's
Oh, that's
Yeetus,
the name.
Yeetus Fetus, Fraser, and
Oh,
Ventrarial. Ventarial? I can't pronounce.
Ventarial.
Yeah, I can't pronounce stuff. Yeah, Ven had a little mix up where he got the times mixed up. He didn't know it was Eastern, and he ended up not being able to show up to an earlier podcast. But mistakes happen, it's no big deal. But yeah, thanks for stopping by, guys, and just tune in next week. All right, bye.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks again.